But often, we've got uphill aspirations, but we've got downhill habits. And the only way, if you want to really go up to reach those aspirations, is hard work, dedication, consistency.
Welcome to Brew, the world's hottest sports podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bromfield, and I'm thrilled to have you join us for another exciting episode. At Brew, we dive deep into the latest topics and trends in the sporting industry, offering diverse perspectives and thought-provoking discussions. Whether you're a passionate fan, a professional athlete, or simply a sports enthusiast, this is the place to be. Join me as we explore everything from game-changing strategies to behind-the-scenes stories, all aimed at elevating your understanding of the world of sports. This is Brew.
Muhammad Ali once said, "I hate every minute of training." But I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. A common conversation topic within the world of sport today touches on the tenacity, grit, and determination that it takes to be a world-class athlete. Similarly, this discussion is growing as it too begins to shed light on the well-being of elite performers that are under the public eye for their outstanding achievements. Joining us today is an individual that may have a unique perspective on this sentiment. Heinrich Grobbelaar is a true visionary and an authority in the field of applied sports psychology. Heinrich's academic journey is a testament to his unwavering commitment to advancing the understanding of sports psychology. He holds a BSc in Sports Science, a BSc Honours, and an MSc in Sports Science, all from Northwest University. He too holds a BA Honours degree in Psychology from the University of Stellenbosch. To further deepen his expertise, Heinrich pursued a PhD in Sports Science, solidifying his standing as a leading figure in the domain of sports psychology. With a trail of groundbreaking research, Heinrich continually pushes the boundaries of our understanding, exploring the intricate connection between the mind and athletic performance. In one of his most recent publications, Team Cohesion and Performance during a University Soccer Championship, Two Sides of the Coin, offers valuable insight into the crucial relationship between team unity and performance. Beyond academia, Heinrich's personal experience as a student athlete excelling in cricket, rugby, and even cycling have equipped him with a unique perspective on the challenges athletes face. Today, we have the honor of engaging in thought-provoking discussions with Heinrich Grobbelaar. So, get ready to be inspired as we delve into the fascinating world of sports psychology and uncover how it can elevate athletic performance to unprecedented heights.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me tonight on your show. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to you asking me some questions. I got to put it out there that Michael is actually one of my students. So I tend to ask the questions and he's got to give the answers. And tonight the roles are reversed. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. I must say, this has been an episode that I have very much been looking forward to. Of the various conversations we've had in the hall of the sports science department building, and me having asked you to come on a few times, I must say I am looking forward to being able to unpack this discussion and, as I said in the preamble, to dive a little bit more into the field of sports psychology and also come to know a bit more of the personal side as to who you are beyond the realm of being a professor. And perhaps for the benefit of our listeners who may be unfamiliar with your background, may you kindly provide a brief synopsis as to who is Heinrich Grobbelaar and how does your story correlate to your endeavors within the psychology field?
Yeah, no, listen, you're putting me on the spot here. I've been looking forward to this, but you also set the bar quite high with that intro and all the stuff that you had to say. I'm really just, or when I grew up, I was just a baller. Brew, I was just a baller. I really just enjoyed sports, and I wasn't that necessarily the most natural gifted athlete in terms of speed and strength and stamina. But if you gave me a ball, whether it was a cricket ball or rugby ball, or my friends will debate this, but a golf ball, whatever. I could manage and I could handle my own, and I really enjoyed sport. It was an escape from everything else that was going on in life. It's something that I reveled in. I really pursued it and had ups and downs as most athletes do. And then eventually, it got to the point probably in high school where you got to start making decisions. What next? Got aspirations to play certain sports maybe at a high level, but you also realize that that's not sustainable in the long run, and you got to find something else to do. So I think initially I was drawn to physiotherapy, because those are the guys who fixed me up and could get me back onto the field. And the one downside of doing a lot of sport was my grades weren't that great. And so I would just not have qualified for physiotherapy. And so I started looking at alternatives, and I thought, maybe back in the day we called it human movement science. Today we call it maybe sports science. And I thought that's going to be the avenue to take me towards biokinetics, which again is like doing rehabilitation work and using exercise as a form of medicine and treatment. And so eventually my pathway in academia started, and I started studying, and at the same time I was a student athlete. And around that time I also started realizing I'm not really necessarily going to make it as a pro athlete. The body started flaring up, a few injuries and a few experiences along the way, and performance started to plateau. And so eventually through my studies, and again, I was set on one thing, and eventually, I fell in love with the subject because of a specific mentor or a lecturer that I had. Someone who really challenged me to think differently about life and think differently about what I do and what I'm studying. And eventually then, because that was his subject area, that's the area that I went in. And of course, that was just the starting point. And that was probably about 28 years ago. So yeah, getting to this point, there's been a lot of avenues and different paths that I've taken, and ups and downs and setbacks. But eventually, I've been in academia for 25 years, passionate about teaching, sharing the knowledge that I do have, the experiences that I have, doing research alongside the teaching. It's core, par for the course in terms of academia. And then again, more recently started doing consultation work again, really starting to work with athletes and coaches again, and getting their hands dirty outside in the field.
It's always enlightening to hear the stories of how individuals come to the point where they are in their journey. And as you say, being an athlete, and as you got to the point within your path, within your journey of, okay, am I going to go this way or am I going to go this way? And I, in my personal experience of the past few months, found that often you're given decisions that you need to make, or the strings that you need to cut, because you know that, okay, I can no longer place my energy in this space, and I need to start focusing over here. But what do I want to choose? Because I'm so passionate about everything that I'm currently invested in, not involved in, but invested in. And sometimes there's the way in which things work out, those strings are just cut for you. And as you said, you had a mentor in the right place at the right time to guide you. And similarly for me, I had someone there to go, okay, well, have you applied this perspective? Have you tried to view the situation or the context from this point to try and reanalyze how you can move forward that will be the most beneficial for you? And you're talking about the stories of your past. And the one thing I always remember is in class, there's a infamous game-winning try story that you always cover about this Corsace league that occurred at the rival University of Stellenbosch. So that was the first thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, but what you're not saying is it was actually a try that was never scored. I had a great opportunity to score, or at least to give the ball to someone else who was in a much better position. But there were so many things going through my head, I won't go into the details, that eventually I messed it up, and it became the try losing, or the match losing try that never was. And today, the guy that actually tackled me, we're still very good friends. So every now and again, he would rub it in. But yeah, that's one great example of where my decision making and my mental ability to sum up the situation failed. And I've had many, many examples like that. But that's really the one that I always bring to class and make a bit of fun of myself. So I'm glad you can remember that part.
Something you also touched on, which I thought was quite cool, and you said when you were going into the realm of academia and you were trying to foresee what you wanted to land up doing one day, and you mentioned physiotherapy was one of those options you're interested in pursuing, and it focused on the field of rehabilitation. And now you're more involved, I would say, within the field of sports psychology. And
Yeah.
the realm of sports psychology holds an incredible power, the power to shape the minds of athletes, unlocking their true potential and propelling them to extraordinary achievements. Through psychology, one has the capability to harness the limitless potential of the human mind, which can lead to remarkable athletic performances. May you share with the audience, how does the field of sports psychology tap into the depths of the mind to elevate athletic performance to unprecedented heights?
Michael, I'll try and answer your question now. As you were speaking in terms of where I thought I was going to be going, I said physiotherapy and then a related field, biokinetics. And now definitely I'm in a performance sport environment with sports psychology specifically. But interestingly enough, the psychology of injuries is something that we've done quite a bit of research on of late. I think it's very relevant because athletes, you get two types of athletes, the ones that are injured and the ones who will sustain injuries. And the mental side of that is something that's really fascinating to me. But you asked the question, how do you tap into the depths of the mind? I think even before we get to those depths, it's about sometimes just getting to the point where you're scraping the surface. There's lots of athletes out there that has never worked with sports psychology consultants, performance behavior consultants, call it what you want. But they got to a level in sport through their own doing and through their own experiences and trial and error sometimes. And they've reached levels through sheer dedication, hard work, and attributes that they possess. And I think sometimes what we're trying to do with sports psychology is almost like it's actually a fairly straightforward field. It's about studying behavior of athletes. And for example, where I said you just sometimes got to start to scrape the surface is to do something as simple as helping athletes understand that your thoughts impact your emotions, so how you're feeling, and that will impact your behavior. And the behavior will again impact how you feel and how you think. And it becomes a cycle. And so something as easy as that could be the starting point when you work with athletes. And what you're really trying to do is to help them understand themselves better, help them to explain behavior, whether that's positive behavior, negative behavior, optimal performance, suboptimal performance. That's really the game in which we're working, is that space of trying to figure things out together. And then probably when you're saying, well, you should be going into the depths, that's probably getting to the point where one of the roles that sports psychology consultants have is to try and change behavior, to optimize behavior, to get the best out of that athlete. And clearly there, the mind can take athletes, really far and help them to overcome adversity and obstacles and pain and fatigue, depending on the sport and the context, that bound to set in. And then often the thing is that the mind at some point needs to not take over as such, but it needs to work as hard as what the body is. And you need to help athletes to get the most out of them, or out of the mental performance.
Goes back to what I touched on earlier, that you were talking about the mental performance side of sports, hones in on an athlete's ability to dedicate themselves to the specific sports in which they are invested into. And I alluded to it earlier, it's an investment that when you are within sports, it's about how are you willing to be consistent. And a phrase in which I came across at the start of this year, and it's something I've tried to hone in on with the leadership team that are involved within my residence, it's consistency above complacency. How do you, within a environment that is so difficult in the sense that it requires so much of you, that it needs 100% of your energy, your mindset, needs to be perfectly in tune with everything that's going on. How do you remain consistent to ensure that you are going to be day in and day out performing? And obviously we are all human beings and personalities come into play, and each individual may be different to another. And day in and day out, you have to now cater for those personalities. And you were mentioning when there's individuals coming into a space, you are trying to work on their habits. And my mind immediately went to thinking of the Michael Jordan Last Dance Netflix series, where in that series, one of their teammates, one of the crucial teammates to their team, he was a party animal, bluntly put. And it was a part of his personality that he needed to let loose every now and then, but the coach knew that this is how he had to work with that individual to ensure that mentally on game day he was going to be able to perform. But not in that same breath, you get those who can't perform under pressure. And it's really cool to see that through a psychological perspective, when you're honing in on routines, you can start to break down the crux of how you can enhance performance. And as we did in peak performance in class, you then learn how to periodize and make sure that these athletes can perform when they need to perform. And that's excluding the external and physiological factors that also come into play.
Don't quite know if there's a very specific question in there, because you talk in such a lot of sense. I can really see, you've done the hard grafting also in academia over the last couple of years in terms of where you're taking this discussion and bringing all those elements in. And yeah, it really is a case of, the combination of the physical attributes, the technical, the tactical side of sport. It's that consistency that you're referring to. It's one thing to be motivated to do something once. It's something else to do it 100 times. And so even recently I went on a pre-season alignment camp with a team that I'm working with. And we really, had a long discussion with the players led by one of the assistant coaches about how do you continuously push the bar? How do you move the needle to get better? And we use this analogy or this question that we asked, who's really going to make it? Is it the guy who works hard, or is it the talented athlete? And what we came down to is to say, well, not everyone's going to start on the same page in terms of ability and pure talent. But often, we've got uphill aspirations, but we've got downhill habits. And the only way, if you want to really go up to reach those aspirations, is hard work, dedication, consistency. And again, maybe touches on this, the question that you asked in terms of motivation. Motivation is that nice thing. It's that question, why? What drives me? What moves me forward? And that's the thing that really gets you moving. But the thing that will prevent you from slipping back is discipline. And I think you being a swimmer, I think that's probably one sport, maybe specifically at the student athlete level, where the hours that you train and the number of hours and the time of day that you train and, the consistency through which you train, it really is something that requires a lot of discipline. It's easy maybe sometimes when it's fun and it's nice and there's people around you, but when it's really cold and miserable out there, to get in your car, drive to the pool or to whatever sport you need to go and do. If it's gym early in the morning, it's you got to do it, but it's really then that discipline that you need to put in for it to have an impact.
As you mentioned, obviously within sport, and it taps into the consistency part. It's being able to have the discipline to push through when times are tough. And I think it's important to tap into within this level of sports. We're referring to athletes that are performing at an elite level. It's that, so to speak, high performance status. It's not your ground level or coming to be learning the basics of sports. And with that, you mentioned talent versus hard work. And often in the early development stages of sports, talent can outshine those that are hard workers. But over time, hard work and consistency allows us athletes to bear the fruit of the time that they're investing into themselves. But another factor that is often overlooked is come game day, BMT. In the crucible of high pressure moments, mental resilience emerges as the ultimate game changer for athletes. It's here that we find the extraordinary stories of athletes who thrive under pressure, delivering performances that leave us in awe. Something I wish to focus on today is the strategies and secrets that enable athletes to excel in intense situations. Could you enlighten us on the techniques athletes employ to not only withstand pressure, but also thrive and deliver exceptional performances?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a difficult one, and I don't have a single answer for that, because I think each athlete is unique. Each athlete is different. Yeah, and you just sometimes get those athletes who they seemingly go through. I wouldn't say they go through the motions during training. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing it well. They're training hard. You can't fault their effort or their attitude necessarily. But you just know that they are guys who, on the day, you want them in your team. You use the example of Dennis Rodman, And I watched that series as well. I loved it because it really had to do with people around him that had to understand him, knew that every now and again he had to be, in a way, let loose, because you want that guy on your team rather than playing against you. So you sometimes have those individuals to come match day, they just take it to another level. Of course, on the other end of the spectrum, you've got guys who struggle on match day. There's nerves that take over. Nerves are very common. Thoughts about failure, concerns, worries. So some people are hampered by that. So, there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to helping athletes to be, those BMT players, the big match moment guys with the temperament. It's also something that comes over time. And I think the one thing that we forget, even with high-performance athletes, is what we see is almost like that tip of the iceberg. We see the 90-minute performance, or the 1 minute that it takes to run that 400 meter, but you don't see the hours and hours and hours to get to the level or to get to that performance. So you don't always know what happens behind the scenes. That player who copes under pressure in a high stakes situation when they've got the opportunity to win the game. They failed many, many, many times in training, trying to get to that point where they will not fail in that high pressure situation. And I think even what you said, with Michael Jordan, there's that famous quote where he said, how many shots have he taken and how many shots has he missed, and how many times did he take the final shot to win a match and miss? And it's into the dozens. I don't know the exact figures. I can't recall. But it's about being consistent and doing it, and in doing it, you really get better. But it's often a case of fine tuning and assisting that athlete to get to that next level. Again, I'm saying, I love to use the analogy of just scraping the surface, just getting into their heads a little bit, get under their skin maybe a little bit, try and disrupt them a little bit during training, so that you're almost simulating what will happen in a real pressurized situation on match day. So there's many different ways in which to try and accomplish that, but it's really to get to a point where they can control the things that are under their control. And those are things like the things that you've got 100% control over is in team sports is how do you communicate? If everyone and everything goes quiet, then you're in trouble, but you can control the extent to which you keep on communicating, lifting people up, instructing, asking questions, the effort, that's something again that you can control. There's a lot of stuff that is not under your control, and you got to react to those. But the things that are like effort and persistency and even planning, what ifs, planning for unforeseen circumstances, planning in advance, what might happen in specific situations, how will I react, how will I adapt? Those are things that, even though it sounds as if you don't have control over them, if you put your mind to it beforehand and you rehearse it and make it part of your habit and your routines, that's probably hinting in the right direction in terms of what we can do to assist those athletes in those pressure moments.
Hey there, Balls Nation. Just a quick pause in the action here. You already know that our mission is to bring you the hottest, most insightful discussions on everything sports related. But as we continue to grow and expand our reach, we can't do it alone. Your ratings, reviews, and shares enable us to reach more sports enthusiasts like you and build a community where diverse perspectives thrive. So, here's the only ask I have of you. Please help us spread the word. It only takes a few seconds to leave a review or a share, but its impact is immense. Thank you for being a part of the Brew family. Let's keep the conversation going and elevate the landscape of sports together.
Now you touched on the what ifs that happen within sports, the moments that are unforeseen, unplanned, and for some that can entirely throw off your performance. And I recently saw a short clip from, I can't remember where it came from, the source, but it spoke about Bob Bauman, who was Michael Phelps' coach from the early 2000s, where he was at the Sydney Olympic Games, moving all the way on into 2016 in his last Olympic Games, and truly an icon and GOAT within the world of swimming. And in this clip, it spoke about how Bob Bauman would specifically play with Michael in the sense he would do certain things to intentionally try and throw him off in training, such as throwing equipment away that he would think he would need. And then mid-set, okay, where's this going to be? Or if, for instance, if you have a leaky goggle or you're trying to put on your suit and your suit tears, what are you going to do then? Because now how are you going to race or perform? And then your mind starts to go on this train and it becomes a snowball and you're like, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure how this is going to work. And then, as you rightfully mentioned, it's those what if moments. And it's interesting to see how some coaches implement that into training regimes to ensure that these athletes, such as Michael Phelps, come game day or come race day, they're able to stand up and whatever the storm may throw them, they're able to perform and give the best that they can do. And something you were touching on specifically focused on the team sport dynamic and how different players need to show up on the day, especially within an elite athlete environment, and they need to contribute to the team. Similarly, or perhaps on the flip of the coin, for athletes that are only performing for themselves, and I say that in the sense that they are racing under their name, they aren't representing a greater team. For instance, in swimming or in running, it's not a relay race. It's you by yourself in your own lane, or it's you in the bar for high jump, or you in the sand pit for long jump, or the javelin for javelin. And you now need to perform the best that you can to ensure that you can either chase a PB or successfully defend a title or claim that BHAG moment that, as little kids, you all dream of having and getting an Olympic gold. And whilst you're speaking, something that came to my mind is the catastrophe model within psychology and how these individual athletes now need to be able to cope with anxiety on top of that BMT pressure of, okay, I need to now live up to the moment and I need to somehow perform optimally under the pressure or the scrutiny of the public watching me whilst I'm trying to do the thing that I love doing. And I also thought of, I don't know if it was in your class, but there was a story where you spoke of a gymnast that was, I think it was high bar. And please correct me if I'm wrong. And you gave them the analogy or the story of a truck. And it's something so small, but it catered to the personality of the athlete to help them get through that moment.
You're right. It's a gymnast, but it's a story where so just to give a bit of context, it was a young female gymnast who had previously competed at a particular venue, and she fell off the beam, during a routine. And I think she got injured, and of course, it was also a setback for confidence. And now, fast forward about a year, she's preparing again for like a interprovincial tournament at the same venue as the year before. And that's where I got the phone call, and from a parent, and we started working with this kid. And I saw her probably for about 5 or 6 consultation sessions. And what was very apparent was that she was anxious, even in, of course, meeting me. It was strange. It's someone that she doesn't know, and so I would have to almost make her relax 2 or 3 times during a consultation session, help her to focus on her breathing and just get some rhythm there, and just get all the somatic symptoms to lower. It was a couple of these sessions over a space of 2-3 weeks in the lead up to this event, where now we've there's been a lot of techniques that we've worked on and ideas, and but I'm getting to a point where I'm almost running out of suggestions or help or the strategies that I'm trying to bring in. And but we're working on, okay, how is she going to deal with this situation of doing this routine? And specifically, it was the dismount was something there that went wrong the previous time. She was Afrikaans speaking, and so the punchline is probably a little bit stronger in Afrikaans, but it came down to the following, where she, at some point, she came up and she said, let's say, sir, it was oom or uncle. So she said, sir, I'm going to imagine a truck. And I was like, what? You've now lost the plot. You like, where are we now? What's happening here? What truck? Where's the truck? She said, no. Because I was trying to get this whole thing about how do you stop that negative thought when it creeps in? Okay, there's this risk. I'm going to fall off the beam. I'm going to everyone will see me. I might get injured again. I'll definitely fail. I will perform optimally. I'll be, points will be deducted. So we went through this process of how do you change those thoughts into something that's more constructive, positive, and you've got to be able to do it fairly quickly in that moment. And so I'm like, okay, we're working on this, we're rehearsing it, and then all of a sudden she says, but sir, there's this little truck, and I'm like, where's the truck? And she says, no, the truck's standing there on the side, and that truck is there to bump me off the beam. And I was like, oof, okay, this is going the other side to where I really want this to be going. I'm really, I don't want you to see a truck, and I don't want you to fall off the beam. And she says, no. All I need to do is I got to wait for the light in front of me, the traffic light, to turn green, which means the truck needs to pass before it can turn green. Once it's green, I can go and I can dismount. And I was like, okay, let's try this. And that became something. And remember, children are quite creative with these type of things. They've got imaginary friends, and they can think, one of those things and imagine stuff. And she came up with this thing that it's just this little truck that's there to bump her off. But if she can wait for the truck to pass, maybe control the breathing again and make sure that, she's confident on this dismount. She did it. And of course, the upside to this story is she didn't perform particularly well, but in terms, during the provincial games, but the dismount and that part of the sequence that was really causing all the anxiety and trouble, she passed that with flying colors. So yeah, that's just a nice story that I'll always bring back to class of this one time when, and it was a sport that I didn't know. I'm 6'5". I don't think I've ever done gymnastics. So I had to really go into this mind of this athlete doing her sport, getting to understand the lingo and what's happening, what's going through her mind, and what's the risks involved. So you almost need to get them to educate you on these sports. In this case, the sport that I didn't know. And she came up with a solution herself based on some of the techniques and the strategies that we were working on all along.
Something I find is really cool within this story is that you're mentioning that you're working with a junior athlete. And within the realm of sports psychology, it shows you that there aren't any boundaries with please correct me if I'm wrong, there's no boundaries with the level of athlete that you're working with or the age. And that you're able to at least hone in on the individual based off of their personality to bring forth or try and ensure that they can perform the best that they can within the context of the scenario.
I would never put like a time frame or time limits or age limits to the work that we could be doing. But of course, it needs to be relevant and needs to be applicable to that age level. I'm working in a sport right now where we, in a way, trying to develop a top-down approach. So these are professional athletes playing at the top level in the country, but for many of them, sports psychology is something new. So we're trying to build it, a system within that club that you're working with the top players. But over time, we actually want to go all the way back to the academy that's up and running. And there's even now talk about expanding it, back to under 10 and under 8 level. But over time, we almost want to get a program, a structure in place that we support young children coming into the sport. Recently, there's a person that did a PhD at the University of the Western Cape. And part of the PhD and one of the products thereof was she wrote a book about sports psychology for children. I think the name of the author is Dr. Denise Bauer. I might be pronouncing it wrong. But it's this fascinating book where she takes cartoon characters it's actually animals. And that these animals are representing scenarios or situations that kids will come across in sport. It might be, one of the animals failed, they made a mistake. And now they're feeling a little bit down. And so there's these life stories that's being taught to these kids through these little animal characters. And then the next guy is again maybe the lion who's very confident and he's got the confidence, and the confidence might get shattered because of something that happened. So I think there's lots of nice storylines and analogies and assistance for children. Of course, the work that you do with children, it's got to be to the point. It's got to be short sessions. The attention span might not be that great, but it's not about sitting around a table and doing a formalized session. It could just be to bring basic things like like proper breathing techniques. I might have even done it with you guys. You do breathing like a whale and like a rabbit and like a snake, just trying to play around with different ways in which animals will breathe. And you can actually learn and see what that does to your body in terms of lowering your activation levels. So certainly I think we shouldn't put age limits on this. I think it's something that is probably needed a lot more at junior levels as part of a comprehensive, offering. It's about looking after the physical side, the technical, the tactical. All those elements need to be there. That's one area in which I think we can improve still.
You're touching on how at a grassroots level or an academy level or a developmental level, there are tactics in which we can employ to try and assist these athletes through their journey to psychologically fortify their minds to perform optimally at that stage of their development, to make them better players, or enhance their performance throughout their career, and to assist them within the longevity of their career. And something that I find very interesting is when you look at this journey that athletes take, elite athletes, on the path to greatness, athletes often encounter a multitude of mental challenges that can either hinder their progress or become stepping stones to unlock their full potential. These challenges, be they self-doubt, fear of failure, or mental blocks, shape the narrative of the journey. These trials over time form critical pillars within an athlete's psychological landscape as it further cements their identity within the realm of sport. Where do athletes begin if they wish to navigate the maze of mental challenges that are pertinent to unlocking their true potential?
Sure. Yeah, you're asking high level, deep questions here, high grade. So there's a few keywords that came out there. You mentioned identity on this whole pathway for athletes. Who they are is really important, and for them to get to a point where they really understand who they are and get to know themselves. The risk, of course, with elite level athletes could be that they develop very, very unilaterally. Being an athlete and being successful in sport, that becomes their identity. Whereas being an athlete is supposed to be and could be and should be just a part of who they are. But it's about, you mentioned this pathway, children starting out. Why do they start out in sport? Typically because it's fun with people. You're doing it because you can learn skills and you become fit. And everyone's got their own, motivation, their reason, their why. And then, of course, as you go through the levels, some athletes will fall out, others will come back in. It depends on whether you mature early or late, and a lot of factors that will play into this in terms of who is eventually going to be making it to the top. And you highlighted a few things, stumbling stones or challenges that athletes might experience. A little bit of self-doubt, a setback, a poor performance. Now there might be some worries. And also, it's not only the stuff that happens on the playing field or on the court or in the pool. It's what happens in life. So sport, in a way, similar to what happens to us in life, is that there will be challenges, that there might be curveballs. It's not always smooth sailing. But again, it's that knowing that I want to improve. I want to get better. I want to push through this. And sometimes it's about an athlete coming to terms with and just voicing some of those challenges that they might be experiencing. Getting someone that they trust, that they value, that can be that ear to listen, just help them to talk through these things, and again help them to understand that what they're experiencing. So, for example, being anxious, it's common in sport. A lot of athletes share that. It manifests in different ways. So some athletes might be struggling in terms of their thoughts, what they're thinking. Others might be feeling, the energy is being drained from the body. But it's to upskill them, help them, how to deal with those situations when they arise. Again, the pressure moments in sport, the unforeseen things, the big setbacks, non-selection, injury, underperformance, being cut from a team. There's so many different things. And a new player coming in, and all of a sudden your place in the team is under pressure. So those things happen, and it resembles real life and some of the challenges. And the question is, what makes one guy come through that and another one might crumble. And then I think just maybe one last thing that I'm thinking now is, especially in youth sport, is to sometimes also just allow it for what it is. It's the child doing sport, and the end product or the end goal shouldn't necessarily be to make them into elite athletes. It's to get the most out of that phase of development that they're in. They're in that team, maybe they've been selected, they might not be there 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years down the line as an elite athlete, but it still played a big role in their own journey and their own development. And I think that's sometimes or often the beauty of sport, is that it accommodates different people with different physiques, abilities, attributes, and there's place and the time to do sport and to learn through sport and to learn about yourself by doing sport.
Something that I've always taken away within sport, and something you touched on now, is sport needs to be fun. When you are at grassroots level sport, and when even if you're in high school and you're coming to play sport, for instance, the matric rugby team, or even whether it be the F hockey team, you're there because you want to actively engage yourself in something different from the daily routines that you might be doing. You want to have fun and play with your friends, be outdoors, be active, and it allows you to have that little bit of dopamine that's released at the end of the session or during the session, whether it may be having a successful pass or scoring a goal, or even if it's that brief chat with your mates during the session or the high five after the session. And it brings it back to the pure basics of what does sport mean in society today, and why it's a critical pillar within any individual's developments throughout their life. Then on the flip of the coin, you're also speaking to identity. And interestingly, you mentioned that some elite level athletes become stuck within the thought processes of needing to chase success, needing to win a trophy, needing to have a medal. And earlier we mentioned sometimes you get the athlete that gets stuck within the process of the day-to-day and not being present. And similarly, when chasing success, you become lost in the process in wanting to excel, which isn't always a bad thing. But my thoughts immediately went to thinking of the likes of in sports. If you are so successful and now individuals start to see you as the next protege, for instance, the Kobe Bryant to a Michael Jordan, or the Patrick Mahomes to a Tom Brady, or the likes of a Caleb Dressel to a Michael Phelps, where in those instances, you now have this immense pressure placed on you by society as they expect you to be the next the next big thing that's going to blow up due to your success. And at that point, the question is, does that now take the fun out of what you're doing? For instance, I think of the likes of a Kyle Chalmers, who is the Australian record holder in the 100-meter freestyle. He's also the world record holder for the 100-meter freestyle short course. He won gold at Rio Olympics and silver in the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. And he's currently just won gold in the recent world champs that just passed. And for months at a certain stage, he was under scrutiny of the Australian media due to him wanting to take a mental break from switching from freestyle to butterfly. But in doing so, there was a pop icon, so to speak, from Australia that was having a comeback story, and an amazing comeback story as how he left the swimming world and fallen back in love with wanting to chase his dreams as an athlete to pursue this, qualified for the Commonwealth Games, but finished third. And because this other athlete switched strokes and now supposedly took his place, he was now getting so much heat from the public. And I find it sad that at that point, sport no longer becomes about the sport. And then you start to look at political factors or economical factors and how that can influence athletes from truly chasing their dreams or wanting to pursue something for the fun of something, but also for wanting to excel in what they love, such as a Patrick Mahomes or a Kobe Bryant or a Caleb Dressel.
Yeah, now remember the one thing, so you touch on socioeconomic, sociopolitical factors, those things are often a big part of athletes and their fuel, their drive to chase, or to use sport as that vehicle to make means in. You can earn a salary, you can become the role model, you can be celebrated, you can become visible, you become a brand. So those things can sometimes be, drivers of behavior towards being successful or being excellent. In doing it, sometimes, and again, now I think with social media, it's definitely more challenging. So athletes sometimes, they lose their right to privacy. There's a lot of infringement on their day-to-day lives. Like they can't do what other people of their age can do and go to places because they're constantly in the public eye. They got to constantly be wary of where they are and what they do. And what I'm trying to get at is that some athletes at the very top, now I'm talking the top level of sport, it could actually become a very lonely place. And so some of them, whereas we spoke earlier about the fear of failure or the fear of maybe injuries, there's even a thing called the fear of success. Some athletes do not necessarily want to be the top athlete in the world because that becomes a very lonely place because everyone else then is gunning for your position. They're coming for you. Everyone's working hard to chase you down and to beat you. And of course, there are these examples of athletes, and I'm specifically now thinking team sports, where the final whistle of the World Cup blows and you've won, the first emotion that athletes experience is relief, not enjoyment. It's the amount of pressure and the 4-year or 8-year cycle that you were working in and towards this outcome that you just accomplished or achieved. Unfortunately, it loses its value because you might have lost the reason why you took up sport 10, 15 years ago, which typically was because of enjoyment, because of fun, because of doing it with people, growing as you were doing it. As long as you can still have that element of fun. And I think that comes down to coaches and culture of organization or club or a team, is making sure that sport is what it is. It's a game. It's something that's fun. Of course, I read today, actually in a class, I read to my students from a book where this particular triathlete said, triathlon isn't fun. Playing soccer is fun. Playing baseball is fun. But triathlon is everything but fun. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be tough. At one point, fatigue and all of that will creep in. But still, you got to figure out that way of still being satisfied and enjoying what you're doing. Because after all, it is really think about society. Where else do you get this opportunity to go into a battle, into a competition? Whether it's you against the clock or you against yourself or you against an opponent. You do it with friends, with your teammates that you've suffered with and trained hard with. And now you go into a competition or into a battle. But I think really the moment when it just becomes hard work and it just becomes a routine and it just becomes another day at the office, even though that office might be outside in the sun, that's really when a big part of sport and the intrinsic value of sport might get lost. So I think it's just super important is to put things in place to make sure that it's still enjoyable and fun.
Perhaps a perfect segue and something you're touching on here is you're looking at the mindset of the athlete and how that mindset differs depending on the context of the sporting code itself. And in the world of sports, the mindset of an athlete is often the differentiating factor between greatness and mediocrity. It's the driving force that propels them towards their goals, fuels their determination, and ultimately shapes their destiny. May you shed some light on how different mindsets manifest in athletes and pave the way for greatness?
I think the starting point is to remember that, and I think that's the work of sports psychology consultants, is that we first and foremost dealing with a person. That person happens to be an athlete who might be a competitive or elite level athlete who plays a particular sport, who might be playing in a particular position or they've got a specific role or function on the team. So there's of course these different layers to it. At the same time, it's if you take that person and you take it back into where do they come from? What's the environment which they are living, growing up? What's their life story? That part is often coming through in the mindset that they and the actions that they live out on a day-to-day basis. So you get the athletes who got to that level through sheer hard work. It was hard work and hard knocks, the school of hard knocks of life that got them to that point. So that's one mindset. There isn't a single mindset. It's every athlete has their own mental makeup, but at the same time, it's also about their physical attributes, their technical, their tactical ability. Spiritual realm, I firmly believe, plays a big role. And it's really how the mindsets are shaped by the environment that's being created by coaches and support staff and medical staff, sports scientists, all of those. In terms of mindsets, you get the one guy in the team that is just super driven for performance. That's the thing. He wants to score and he wants to win, and he's got this intense desire to win. He's just got this will to beat the guy in front of him. And then you've got the guy who his mindset is about being rock solid and tough. Maybe playing in a position where defense is crucial, and it becomes that mindset that I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to defend my channel, whatever the context for the sport is that's required. And then you get the guy whose mindset is, this is a privilege. I'm doing something that I enjoy. It's fun doing it. I'm doing it with people, and I'm there to energize those around me. I'm buzzing with energy, and I'm lifting everyone up around me. So I don't think there's definitely not a single mindset. It's to optimize what each athlete has, what makes them unique. Might often be referring back to team sports, but it's what that individual athlete brings to the team setup. Of course, in individual sports, there's no place to hide. The clock or the measuring tape or the points for, points against, you're going to be found out. It's you against an opponent, or it's you against the clock. So that again has a different mindset to it. It's a place where you need to cover all the bases, because if you don't, you're going to be found out. You'll be found wanting. So it's more responsibility. Whereas in a team environment, again, there's often the case that others might step in for you. When you're up, someone else might be down. When you're down, someone else might be there to pick you up. So, and again, there you get some players who's really just after the team. It's not about themselves, and often you've got teams with this mixed match of individuals, each with their own ambitions, their own motivations, their own drivers. But it's to get to know those athletes so that you can get the best out of them, and that they can get the best out of themselves.
When you start to try and put it in perspective in terms of the context of sport, and something that you touched on in terms of trying to understand the athlete and how each athlete is, or they have a unique makeup. First, you have to look at the sporting code, and then the events in which they partake, then perhaps the positions, and finally the personalities of the individual, to better understand how can you assist them to optimally perform, knowing that each individual is different. And immediately my mind went to American football, where, for instance, you look at your defensive line in comparison to your wide receivers, and then you look at your quarterbacks. And then even team per team, each quarterback is uniquely different to the next in the way in which they think, their composition, and their physical capabilities, which is unique to their specific role on the team. But a common variable amongst any sports athlete, amongst any elite competitive athlete, is confidence. And intangible yet incredibly powerful force that propels athletes to conquer challenges, shatter barriers, and transcend limitations. It's the secret ingredient that turns potential into reality. However, it too can result in undesirable performances. When analyzing different sporting codes and the diverse personalities of amongst athletes, self-poise may be packaged uniquely so that of the specific athlete. In your professional experience, may you share some insight with the audience regarding how an athlete may cultivate unshakable confidence and harness it to enhance their performance on the grandest of stages?
All right, so maybe I must just put it out there that I don't think there's only one type of confidence. So you're referring to self-confidence. I think that's often where it starts. It's the individual. My beliefs in my own ability. That belief is built around, what is the effort that I've put in? How hard have I trained? How well am I prepared? What is my physical attributes? I will always go back to this and say, well, there's this physical side to performance, but there's also my tactical ability, my technical ability. How well-rounded am I as a player in terms of my decision-making? Now, all those things, as well as past experiences and in particular recent successes, those things build confidence. But confidence is a very slow process. It's almost like a little piece of snow that starts to roll and it gathers, another piece, a little chunk that adds to it. So it's this thing that builds over time, almost like a snowball effect. But confidence at the same time is one of the most fragile things, because in one moment, that confidence can be shattered. But then in team context, there's also, I need to have confidence in you as my fellow teammate. And then the third type is and that's got to do with trust. I need to be able to, so trust is a form of confidence, the trust that I have in your ability. Right at the beginning, you recall the situation where I messed up the possibility to score a try that might have won the match, or that would have won the match. And the issue there was I didn't trust the guy next to me because he was a substitute player, was playing out of position, and I didn't trust that he will actually catch the ball. Now, catching a ball, he would do it 95 out of 100 times. But I decided this is going to be the one time where he's going to drop the ball. So I didn't have trust in him. That cost us the game. And then eventually it's also about trust as a team. Sometimes you can have these individuals with a lot of confidence, but the team needs to get to that point where they start performing and make progress and grow and develop. And then there's one more type of confidence, and that is faith. Now, where self-confidence is my beliefs in my own ability. And one way of getting that is also to be affirmed by others. So other people praising me or giving me feedback on things that I do well. And we typically say, as a rule of thumb, that when you can have a session where people are positively communicating to each other, they're affirming each other, that you must try and balance the ratio 2-1. Praise someone on 2 character traits for every one physical or skill attribute that you're praising them for. And the reason for that is that, character traits are really things that the athlete will keep on working hard at. It's what they bring to the team. It's what helps them to develop. Whereas if you hammer on the skill level, and everyone is starting to say exactly the same thing. You are good at kicking the ball. You're good at kicking the ball. You're a good kicker. It might even create a bit of a ceiling where this guy might eventually say, okay, well, I'm really good at this, but I'm not gonna push the boundaries any further. I'm just gonna become, in a way, complacent with what I'm already good at. So you're not willing to work hard to push it forward. Last type of confidence for me is faith, and that has got to do with, do I have confidence and trust in a higher power? Because confidence, again, the self-confidence part is putting my trust in my own ability. Faith has got to do with putting my trust in the Creator, who's given me this opportunity, given me these talents to play sport. And that those are almost on opposite ends of the spectrum, whereas the one might place a lot of pressure on you, the other one is there to take that pressure away. But yeah, so I've just got an angle where you need to consider various aspects around confidence. But maybe in closing, what you mentioned at the start is a crucial element and a crucial component. Not to say that all athletes with confidence will perform, and that you might get athletes that are lacking in confidence, but that they can still perform on the day. So it's no guarantee for success or a good outcome, in a way it's a prerequisite, but there are exceptions.
I think you rightfully mentioned now at the end, within confidence, there is a very fine line and, so to speak, a tipping point. And I always, in my mind, especially when we're in class and we cover this topic, I pictured a seesaw. And, knowing that center point, which acts as the fulcrum, is that optimal level. And you start at a low point where, the seesaw is lying angled up. I'm trying to show with my hands. If the audience can imagine this, it's a diagonal line going up and you're starting at the bottom, and that's your low point of confidence. And as you start to increase your confidence, the seesaw is going to balance itself out. But as soon as you get too confident, that seesaw is going to tip straight back down and you're going to fall off.
That's probably that point where, when arrogance starts to creep in, because you get athletes in some sports and some positions maybe that's got to have this aura around them. They are super confident. Their behavior, what they say, what they do, how they do things, it's just oozing confidence. But it's also sometimes it's that fine line where you become complacent, you become overconfident, you become cocky in a way. Those athletes sometimes, when you reach that tipping point, they could fall hard. But it's sometimes also part of the mental makeup of athletes is to say, well, that showboating, that I'm the best in the world and you can do whatever you want. I'll be ready for it. I'll be up for it. It's sometimes a deliberate strategy to come out with that brash confidence in one's ability.
Something immediately came to my mind is the terms of gamesmanship. The dubious tactics that are employed for one in which they are trying to get an advantage, which doesn't necessarily tap into confidence, but it employs in the ways in which individuals try to gain an edge, which then lends into the likes of Rafael Nadal, who, as you rightly mentioned, they ooze confidence. And there was a clip, I don't know if you saw it, it was a pre-game for, I think it was the French Open, where in the final, in the warm-up tunnel, in the run-out tunnel, he is seen to be running up and down, rehearsing the shots that he's going to take when he goes out on the court, making the same effects or noises that he was going to do. And his opponent was there looking at him in awe, number one, because it's this idol that he's looked up to for all of his life. And now he's here in this grand moment and he's getting to play a Rafael Nadal. But at the same time, mentally, it draws you out going, oh, flip, I'm playing Rafael Nadal. And as you mentioned, for some athletes, it can be a winning charm, so to speak, to have that extra bit of confidence, but obviously depending on the context. And I think in my own experience, going back into the realm of swimming, I know when you stand up on the block and you look at all the others around you and you can go, I know that I've worked the hardest out of every other single individual that's next to me right now, that the moment I hit the water, I'm going to beat them off the block. I'm going to beat them under the water, off the breakout, off the turn, and I'm going to out-touch them. It is something that can definitely assist you in optimally performing, having self-confidence. But as you also mentioned, knowing that you have confidence in those around you, your coaches, your psychologists, your physicians, your physiotherapists, your chiropractors, the whole team that comes together to ensure that on the day you can optimally perform, and having confidence in knowing you've optimized the time that you've had to perform is always a good leg of faith to be standing on, knowing that you have dealt the cards that you've been giving to ensure that everything's going to come together when it does. And perhaps a good segue, right? I was hoping, in class, you often give us scenes to think of. And I thought this is a good reversal of the roles here. So I'd like for you to picture the scene. An athlete standing on the precipice of a crucial competition, adrenaline coursing through their veins, their fate hanging in the balance. In these pivotal moments, the grip of performance, anxiety, and pre-game nerves can be overwhelming. Psychological strategies can aid individuals to overcome anxiety and conquer various challenging obstacles, thereby facilitating personal growth to pursue inevitable success. May you enlighten us on the techniques athletes use to transform anxiety into unwavering focus and perform at their absolute best, similar to what we touched on earlier.
Joanna, listen, you took me back there to thinking I'm going to run onto this field now and I'm going to perform. You planted a few doubts there in terms of those symptoms that one experiences or those thoughts that start to go through your mind. Well, ironically, interestingly, I worked with an athlete earlier today. What we did was recently I actually gave them some sports psychological questionnaires to complete. And I scored that, and then I gave them feedback, and then I arranged a one-on-one with this particular player to actually talk through the results in order to really know from him how he's experiencing it and what's the deal here, what's the story. And it is so that this particular athlete does tend to, well, he's got extremely high standards. He tends to be really, really hard on himself. But what we term cognitive anxiety, those are the concerns, the worries, the what ifs. You know, he does experience some of those, and in a way to aggravate the situation is he also perceives those thoughts to have a negative effect on his performance. He's also got a little bit of what we call somatic anxiety, where the body is reacting to this pressure and this tension. It's not overly, it's not too much, and this time around he doesn't appear to have, it doesn't affect his perception is it doesn't affect his performance positively or negatively. So it's almost got like a neutral effect. And this morning, it was really about helping him from almost a theoretical angle understand how these things affect performance. And you got to consider the time frame of the sport that he's involved in. You know, how does it start? So the first few moments in the match is quite crucial to get going, to get the body energized and up and running. And so we spoke earlier today of a few ideas what he can do to calm himself down. And then we made a deal that in the next league match that we'll have, because we've now started this process of helping him to work on some of those thoughts in particular. But in the next league match that I'll be, with a team, we're going to have code language. It's going to be a thumbs up, thumbs down, or a thumb that's pointing sideways. So in that moment, all I'm going to ask him is, how are you feeling? Thumbs up, neutral thumb, or thumbs down. And then depending on his answer, I will know what is needed, or then I can probe. Then I can ask, what right now are you dealing with? Is it your thoughts that are racing, or is it a certain symptom that you're experiencing? I even found out today is that one of the things that he can recall when I asked the question, tell me about when you started playing this particular sport as a kid. And he can remember the sounds of laughter and children and playing in the streets. And something like that could become the thing that in that moment, especially if it's the body that's under tension or under stress, is to try and take him back to sounds and thoughts of his childhood when he played the sport for the fun of the game, for the love of the game. Okay, but it's something that we're going to be working on. And of course, the ultimate is not for me or anyone else, a coach or a sports scientist that's there, to do that with him constantly. It's getting to the point where he will learn and become aware of what his body and his mind and his emotions, feelings are encountering, and then for him to be able to deal with that situation. So we talk about self-regulation. We try and right now to raise that awareness of how thoughts and feelings impact on behavior. And we know that if we can get that cycle in a positive way, the results and the performances will grow and will develop and will get better. But ultimately, it's about giving them those tools, and there's a variety of tools. One of the best ones is breathing activities, but giving them those tools so that he can apply it, and so that eventually he can do it without someone being there and assisting him in that process.
With athletes, something that always needs to be understood is raw emotion. You need to know what they're going through within the process, before the process, and after the process, in order to understand them through a holistic perspective as to how that individual may need assistance. And as you mentioned, something you look at is obviously the factor of self-regulation, being able to be present in the moment, which is something that we discussed or touched on earlier, and being able to recognize emotion, such as anxiety, which could differentiate whether it be trait, state, somatic, or cognitive anxiety, which all have different effects on individuals. You also touched on tools, which are ways in which sports psychologists or consultants like yourself can try and assist individuals or teams to strategize and ensure that they're able to optimally prepare themselves. And myself, being a very audacious individual who always likes to shoot for the moon, or no, shoot for the stars and land on the moon. Because if you're aiming that high, at least you're making it that far. Goals and dreams are the driving forces that fuels an athlete's relentless pursuit of excellence. But what lies at the core of their achievements? Often in class, we have discussed the brilliance of goal setting and visualization, which are two remarkable tools that are used by athletes to manifest their aspirations and achieve unparalleled success. Can you shed some light on how goal setting and visualization contribute to an athlete's performance and help them turn dreams into reality?
Okay, if we start with goals, I think it's just important to put it out there that not all athletes enjoy the process of setting goals. They don't like to set goals, and some find that it restricts them, it stunts their creativity and their flair. It almost boxes them in. But it is one of those strategies or those techniques that have been proven over and over again to have an effect that if you know where you're going, and again, in the context of team sports, that everyone is on the same page, that you align your goals and your expectations. Once you know where you're going, the next question that I often have, for athletes is the question why, or the other question, what for? The why will often give you the intrinsic motivators, the things that drive them. The what for might be the things that are extrinsic. So money, fame, fortune, trophies, medals. Now, once you've got those two things, the what, the goal, and the why you want to achieve that goal, that's where you can figure out the how. What are the actions? What are the things that you need to do to get from point A to point B? And that's where I think much earlier we said, hard work and motivation is a thing that moves you forward, but then it's the discipline that you need to put in place so that you don't slide back to where you started off from. So it's almost like imagining a ladder and you've got to climb one rung at a time. Visualization, it's a very powerful tool. The other term that we use is imagery, and the reason why imagery is sometimes preferred over visualization is visualization implies that there's only a visual element to it. It's closing your eyes and imagining you being in a situation, but you're only seeing the visual cues, the things that's happening around you. Whereas with imagery, it also has to do with what do you feel? So in terms of, again, your emotions, but also your awareness of time and space. If you're a gymnast and you're tumbling through the air, you need to be aware of where you are in relation to the ground. But also, what do you hear? It might even be relevant to think along the lines of, what do you smell? Do you smell the ointment or the rub that you've put on your body, as part of your pre-match routine? So you almost want to try and create real life scenarios, but in the absence of any stimuli. That's what imagery is really powerful at. And of course, imagery can also be used as a tool to accomplish other things in sports psychology consultation setups. So if I want to get an athlete to visualize a challenging situation so that he could implement some of the coping strategies or some of the relaxation drills that we're trying to work on, I can use imagery as that tool to create that setting of pressure that he's going to encounter in a match, so you can then rehearse routines or habits or things that could actually help in that particular situation. But imagery is also powerful to evoke emotion, powerful images of success, of recalling how it feels to stand on a podium when the national anthem is being played and your flag is being raised when you win a medal. So it's a very powerful tool. And of course, it differs from different sports, one to another, but even in a particular sport, you get athletes who will spend a lot of time doing mental preparation. That's the other term that we can use for it, is mentally preparing and in a way simulating in your mind what's going to happen on the actual day of the competition. So yeah, those are two really important techniques or strategies that's there for athletes to utilize and to master.
And I think it also links onto what I mentioned earlier regarding Rafael Nadal, is with visualization, you also get rehearsal. And as you mentioned, you can also get mental rehearsal where you are running through the specifics of your specific event, whichever sporting code that may be, and you are breaking it down, trying to understand all the different variables that are pertinent within that event, and using all your different senses to really encapsulate that moment, to be one with the environment, to relive or rehearse the space in which you want to be in. And I often find myself standing in the shower or in the steam room at the gym, going through or breaking down my races, trying to understand the specific moments that are crucial to ensuring the success or the ultimate way in which to optimize my race. And I always find, this is me personally speaking, that also assists you come race day to have that little bit extra poise, that self-confidence in yourself, knowing that you've done the mental preparation as well as the physical preparation to ensure that you can do what you have already done, because in your mind you've mentally prepared yourself to do that. And I think it also goes back to the start of our discussion where we tapped into the unforeseen, the what ifs, being mentally able to prepare yourself for those moments, such as Bob Bauman tried to do for Michael Phelps within training sessions, trying to prepare yourself for the things that could go wrong, but they aren't going to throw you off because you've already foreseen that and you know how to deal with anything that may come your way. And it's something I heard from Caleb Dressel, and I mentioned it earlier. It's working with the cards that you've been dealt with on the day to ensure that everything that you've put in up until that moment can be the best that you can give to ensure success.
Yeah, because I think what you're referring to is to prepare for those distractors or those things that disrupt. We can plan everything, the perfect execution and the lead up, but on the day, certain things might happen, and it's really about how you adapt and how you deal with those situations. So I think that skill of visualization or imagery or mental preparation, it's crucial as a form of rehearsal. It's a tool that you can use in settings where if you, for example, injured, you can't do the physical training, but you can still do the mental training, rehearsing, for example, a routine or specific sequence in your sport, or a technical aspect of, for example, the swimming stroke. Could be something where if the conditions does not lend itself to you physically being able to train outside, you can train through training the mind. And as you were speaking about after a training session, rehearsing certain things, I immediately had a question for you, is do you do it from a first person perspective, so almost through your own eyes, or would you look from an outsider perspective, or almost like a video camera that's recorded your bout, and now you're trying to maybe analyze from the outside? So, or do you do both?
Normally from the first person perspective, and I try and it's the first person perspective with the view of goggles. I have to add that in because I think that's fairly unique. So I try and break it down from everything that I may hear, smell, see, feel, the emotions, but then I also try and imagine what I need to cut out, the variables that are negatively influential or that may hinder performance, and then how you hone in real time to ensure that this is how you're going to focus and how you're going to prepare yourself when the buzzer goes off.
Yeah, it's about excluding those distractors, the things that are the stimuli that might be there that is not relevant to your performance or your execution of the strategy or the race plan that you might have. But again, it comes down to it's a form of preparation, getting the mind and the body right for competition. So
something cool that you touched on in terms of visualization, the build up to understanding how you're going to visualize your events or yourself within sports, is you said you need to understand the why and the what. And that immediately made me think of Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, where he said this helps us understand why we do what we do, and breaking it down to the different elements that are crucial in your everyday life. So trying to take a step back to introspect and go, okay, this is why I swim, or this is why I'm an academic, this is why I do research, or perhaps this is why when I go home, I play with my dog, or I throw a ball against the wall. Whatever that why may be. I know I'm using very nonchalant examples, but I'm trying to make it something very simple. You had to capture the essence of what propels you passionately pursue your dreams and fulfill your purpose in a single word. What would that word be? In simpler terms, what is the profound why that fuels your journey?
Can I have a double barrel word? Potential development.
Potential development.
Yeah. So irrespective of whether that's teaching students or supervising students who do research or hands-on work with athletes, it's about helping them develop the potential or the talent that is God-given. And that's why I do it. It's to move the bar a little bit, to help them to become better. I love helping, assisting, developing, and I think there's a lot of satisfaction that I derive from that. And so that would be my why. Earlier I said, when you ask the question about why, you also got to ask what for. And the reason why I'm splitting the two up is the why will often give you the intrinsic reasons, the internal motivators. I want to see someone getting better at something. I want to see someone overcoming a challenge, an obstacle. The for what is sometimes because, all right, this is a job. This is a way to earn a living. This is a way to care for my family, my wife. This is, a part of challenging and developing myself. So in a way, that's the for what. But the why, in plain simple terms, it's to develop people.
I think that's really cool when you talk about trying to maximize potential within individuals. And I've had this discussion with a few of my friends before, and it's when interpreting or when analyzing an individual's potential to reach success, and that's regardless of what they are involved in or their various endeavors within life itself, beyond the world of sports. There's value in learning through others. There's value in growing with other people. And you mentioned your wise, the self-development of others to maximize their potential. And I heard this somewhere where someone said, when you're going alone, your trajectory for success is linear. You can only go so far as you are having to learn through your individual failures. And as people often say, a loss is a lesson, but there are only so many losses that you can take in order to learn, which will only get you so far. But when you surround yourself with the right people, which will provide you with different perspectives through their different academic knowledge or their own life experiences and their own upbringings, and it's all dependent on their own context, that development becomes exponential, because now you're learning through their life lessons and their losses in which they've been able to transcend that and better themselves within their own endeavors, whatever that may be within their own spheres of involvement.
Yeah, I'm going to throw something maybe from left field here, is that as much as I am for consistent growth, development, enhancement, betterment, we also will fail. We will make mistakes. We will sometimes go backwards. But I think what you were trying to get at there is that when you learn from someone, and so what I'm trying to get at is to say that we are human. We're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna fail, and that is fine. That's part of being human. That's part of life. Of course, it's better to learn through others' failures, so you don't necessarily need to go and make those mistakes yourself. And I think that's why it's so crucial to surround yourself people that can challenge you and that you can learn from, and that's walked the road before you and can guide you and help you, so that you don't necessarily always need to bump your head the same way that they did, but still pushing forward and going after the next thing. As novel as that is, or as much as we are often driven to do that in order to get better and to perform and to be successful, that in itself can also put a lot of pressure on one. But yeah, I'm on the same page as you in terms of learning through the mistakes of others, or then at just some point making the same mistake so many times that you actually realize, I need to do something different, because with doing the same thing I've been doing all along, I'm not going to reach a different outcome. I got to change the strategy or the approach.
The first thing that comes to my mind is, as people often say, the definition of crazy, or I think it's stupidity, is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I think as we conclude, is there any insightful advice that you could offer to our listeners who share an interest in forging a career within the captivating realm of psychology, sports science, or any other integral facet intertwined within the dynamic world of sports?
Probably most of the people listening to Ballers Brew and these type of podcasts are people that enjoy sport. And I'm a lot more passionate about helping athletes develop skills or abilities or performance than I think I'd ever be in a business setting. And of course, a lot of athletes go on to become great business people. I'm not dishing that field, but it's really about pursuing that which you are. And I don't really like to use the word passion, but the things that you are passionate about, the things that you enjoy, that you derive value from, meaning from. If you love sport, then go and watch it on television or go to a stadium. If you love the science behind sport, then pursue a career in sports science. If the behavioral side and thoughts and emotions and those things are what makes you tick, in the context of sport, pursue sports psychology. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, you've got to do something that you enjoy doing, that you're passionate about, that are willing to invest in. The reality of this field, or these fields, are often long hours and strange hours. And so it does sometimes come at a cost. The same applies to coaches, your high-performance sports scientists, your sport physiotherapists, these guys who travel with teams. It's a highly rewarding field. It's high-paced. It's high pressure. It's continuous. It's long seasons. If it's something that excites you, energizes you, then I think you need to go and do your homework. You've got to go and find out what's available out there. What can you study? What formal qualifications are there? What informal ways is available to further your career? And then I think at the end of the day, you might have a specific path which you plan for yourself. And I think right at the beginning, you asked me, how did I get into this field? Now, for example, what happened is, when I was a fourth-year student, or honor student, I set a goal that year that I'm going to be the best student in the class. We were only about 12 in that final year of study. Now, at undergraduate level, I wasn't the best student in the class. I did fairly well. And then that year, I decided I'm going to give this everything I have. There was a little bit of a carrot dangling in front of me. there was the option that the top student will go and do like a 1-year internship in Australia. And back in the day when I studied, Australia, in terms of sport and sports science, they were really top of the world. And you would know in that era, and I'm talking now 2000, in swimming, they were exceptionally good. So that is what I sacrificed and worked towards in that particular year. At the end of that year, the exchange program fell through the cracks. The person that was there and was supposed to come back to South Africa to enable me to go decided to stay in Australia. So that exchange fell, it was the end. And so I put in all that work and I sacrificed a lot of things, but I loved what I was doing. I really, really enjoyed what I was studying in that particular year. But that opened up a new avenue. Had I not been so diligent at my studies and got the grades that I got, I would never have been approached to apply for a specific position. When the mentor, the guy who got me involved in this field, approached me and said, he's going to resign, he's going to retire from academia. He wants me to apply for the position. And I told him, I'll go and think about it. I didn't go and think as to whether I was going to be applying for it. I was already dreaming about getting that position. And so that's probably my closing thought, is to say, well, you might have an avenue. Remember right at the start, I said, I thought I wanted to be a physiotherapist. I'm not a physio today, not at all. That journey that I set out on has taken me a couple of steps to the left and to the right, but it's been a fascinating journey, and it's not done yet. I've still got a few decades ahead of me. To anyone who wants to work in this area, go and do your homework and then pursue it with everything you've got, similar to maybe what you've done in your own sporting career. And in a way, hopefully some people are inspired by this story. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting evening and discussing with you, and being on the other side of the typical class scenario. So yeah, thanks again for inviting me.
Definitely a takeaway point throughout this whole discussion and trying to understand the psychological aspect within the realm of sports is trying to understand yourself. And as you rightfully mentioned, now each individual is on their own journey, their own path in trying to find their own success in whatever their endeavors may be. But a crucial point to understanding yourself begins with knowing your why. Having a good understanding of your identity and knowing what you are trying to do in order to chase your dreams. For if you know your why, no matter where you are within that journey, when you are faced with adversity or you are faced with moments of doubt and self-conflict, you are able to come back to your roots, the reasoning that grounds you in what you are aspiring to do. And if those plans change, you're still allowed to use that why as a drive to help you keep on moving forward, keep on taking it one day at a time and trying to excel 1% at a time. So thank you so much, Prof. I have really thoroughly enjoyed having you on and being able to speak with you and having you on Ballers Brew. And for all those that are listening, I highly appreciate your time and that you have sat through this episode. And I do trust that it was insightful and enlightening. And I trust that there's many more episodes of engaging content that will be coming your way. But for now, that is it. I'm your host, Michael Bromfield. This is Ballers Brew, signing